You can do either one. I'm going to be close enough here for it to look like you're looking.
All right, okay.
Okay, so what's the difference between teaching and tutoring?
Well, I mean, obviously, of course, both are interested in educating the student, I hope. I think the big difference is it has to do with communication dynamics as much as anything else. I mean, a dyad is just a whole different animal than a class. So when I was working with a student one-on-one for tutoring, it's much more personal. It's harder for the student to hide from what you're trying to do. So that makes it a lot easier to actually just focus on making sure that the goal is accomplished. You know, the student is learning. So I had the luxury of not really having to care about grades or really even discipline beyond some fairly basic things. Of course, if it's just one-on-one also, that's less of a problem as well, because very few people are going to misbehave in horrendous ways when it's just you and him or her. It's just the two of you. So I think the biggest difference is just if it's just you and one other person, you can actually focus on education in ways that you can't in a lot of ways in a class. You can bounce around and hopefully help some people get educated, but it's hard to be able to turn it into the entirety of the purpose, the reason that you're there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing I'd say.
You've taught both math and English. Which one do you prefer?
I mean, I am not enjoying teaching math that much. I prefer English. I think there's more depth to the thoughts that you tend to deal with there. And I mean, maybe this is a legacy of being a tutor, but I think I'm more used to really delving into things in depth. There's a feeling in math, since you're usually just working on a particular process, many students just won't engage with it on any kind of a deeper level, and you can't really blame them. It's like if I'm trying to teach you how to tie your shoe. If once you've learned how to tie your shoe, everybody agrees, okay, you're good, let's move on, and you don't have to think much more about it. So I prefer English in terms of the subject material. I'm beginning to think math is more work than I thought it was going to be, but English was more work. Overall, English was a crazy amount of work. So there might be issues of burnout. I would prefer English. I would probably be happier right now if I were teaching history or something instead.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, my favorite thing about math teaching was if I were teaching a concept and a kid got it in the room, it showed.
Yeah.
And that's a really satisfying.
There is, yeah. You get much more of a sense of the student's actual development. It's much more visible. And in English, sometimes I feel like I am handing down ideas from on high in a way that's a little bit uncomfortable. If I'm suggesting a particular interpretation of why Hamlet is doing what he's doing, it's not always easy to emphasize to the student that this is an interpretation.
Right.
This is not the divine wisdom that says this is why this is happening in this literature or even in your own writing or whatever. It's just, hey, look at it this way. And so I think you worry a bit more in English about whether or not the students are really thinking independently and critically and doing something that leads to like legitimate development of their mentality and personality. You worry sometimes that you're just handing things to them and they're accepting it because you're an authority, and you kind of have to struggle with, that's not why I'm trying to do this. Whereas in math, I mean, you kind of, you're the authority. You're like, no, this is how it works. I am telling you how it works. We don't have to worry about any subtleties in terms of, are you just doing it because I'm the boss? No, it literally is how it works. I just happen to know it at the moment and you don't yet, so let me help you do it. And then once you've got it, and we can move on. So,
Well,
That is
didn't you,
nice.
I seem to remember you telling me about a teacher, we won't mention the name, a teacher who was too authoritarian in the math position.
Yeah, yeah. I've had, when I was a tutor, there were a few teachers I worked with who had a specific way that certain math problems had to be done. So they would, in some cases, count problems wrong if they weren't done in the quote-unquote correct way.
Yeah.
And so that's where, I mean, that's, I think, where the brain development takes place in math is hopefully you are teaching them a tools-based approach. They still need to understand the tool. If they don't know when and how to use the quadratic formula, then you haven't really done your job just if they're able to literally follow along with your steps. So you are sort of giving them tools and hopefully leading them to an understanding that these tools can be used in different places and they still have to make that decision. And so they're still developing in terms of understanding how to use those. And so, yeah, I think it's important in math that you not just say, don't worry about when and how you use tools, just do what I tell you to. I think that's always a problem. To me, that defeats the point of education. I'd like to produce a student who was more capable on their own after they met with me than before they started with me. I don't want to produce a student that is more like me or more obedient to me. I want a student that is, just more able on their own.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think you always have to look out for that. It comes in different shapes depending on whether it's English or math. Yeah.
Right. Well, one of the things that I found about math that for me was very potent as a student was it is logic driven. So we were talking about arguments and how you make arguments. And unfortunately in English you have to spend a lot of time on this is not a good argument.
Yeah, which is that itself is a tough point to get across.
Whereas in math, because you're looking at something like order of operations or commutative property or distribution, they have a logic to them. And if students learn the logic, then they can apply that logic to a problem.
Yeah, but you're never going to get past the aesthetic aspect of using knowledge. Math and English are sort of coming at it from different directions. So in English, you're sort of coming at it from the aesthetic point to the more logical maybe, and in math maybe you're going in the other direction. But if I can't get the students to understand, how functions reflect real-world relationships between things, and that math is a way of understanding the world around you, and then hopefully with the highest level being an understanding of when they can apply these tools or how to select the tools they need in a particular case, then I still haven't completely done my job. So I think in both cases you're trying to link those two things. So in English you might be saying like, okay, now you understand the basics of argumentation. Now I need you to form a concrete argument that actually works. And once you've been able to transfer the basic knowledge to a specific case, you're going to be in great shape. And in math, it's kind of the other way around. Here's a specific case, but until you understand how to apply it in a general sense, it's hard to say that you understand it. You have a tool in your toolbox, but somebody else has to tell you when to use it. It's not the same thing. So, I mean, I don't think you're ever going to avoid that dilemma in teaching. It's easier sometimes when you're coming from one direction or the other to just focus on the part that your subject is focused on.
Right.
So it's easier teaching math if you just say like, here's a tool, I'm going to show you how to use the tool, I'm going to stand over your shoulder while you use this tool on a problem that I told you to use it on, and then we're going to say you know it. And sometimes that's necessary.
Yeah.
And I don't know all students are going to get it.
It wasn't until college that I got to a class, well, I shouldn't say that. I did get, when we did proofs in geometry, some of my writing skills really served me because That was the first time a teacher had used the word elegant for something in math.
Yep.
In other words, a proof that was smart and also economical. You know, so many times in math, if you are dealing with like a word problem, let's say, and you're trying to translate it from language into symbols,
Yeah.
Sometimes your inclination as a mathematician is to go the long way around.
Well, and I mean, I think redundancy it's probably one of the last lessons that they're going to get, and honestly I think a sign of them understanding the math has to do with when they are able to remove some of those redundancies. Some of this is in a fairly straightforward way. I mean, a lot of times when I'm initially teaching something, I may teach them some steps that include, I want you to write down this basic equation which is used in general when I see this situation. Now, once you've learned how to do this, that equation is in your head and you shouldn't need to write it down again. But I think it's a sign of them integrating it, you know, internalizing the knowledge and being able to use it.
Tell me about proofs.
My students are really struggling with proofs. They mostly do very badly at it, and they have trouble with a lot of the basic concepts on it. I had a student this year that, as an extra credit assignment, she wanted to write essays on this music, and I said, well, okay, well then I can give you some extra credit towards proofs if you make this consist of because statements. I want you to say, like, not just I like this song. You have to tell me, you know, this song is pleasant listening for X because Y, or I did not like this song because something else, with the hope that they're going to join that kind of cause and effect. But again, I don't know that you can ever, maybe they're just not at the age yet. I mean, hopefully a lot of things in teaching where you tell them now, you hope they get it in 10 years. So, I mean, I hope that some of that comes through at the end, but I don't know. Proof's
Well,
hard.
math and music have a nice relationship with each other. Form is very much a part of music, you know, and interval and harmonics, those are all based on numbers.
Yep. And I mean, the idea behind proofs is a pretty straightforward one, which theoretically they have already, I mean, one would hope that they grasp the concept of cause and effect from any one of a number of other classes, but you put it in a mathematical context, and they often struggle. We probably should be doing more proofs. Maybe it's the novelty that causes them to reject it. But
It's harder.
yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
well, and it requires
almost
the
all
style
human
of thinking.
beings, when something becomes hard, you're being attacked by them.
I know.
Almost all human beings, when something becomes more difficult, our initial reaction is not, yippee!
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think one of the things that bothers them a lot is the requirement to be careful, which, I mean, one of the big problems with proofs always is, okay, I know that you know that, we all know that, we can look at the drawing and see that it's true, but you're not allowed to say it unless you have established everything leading up to it. And that, again, requiring that level of precision in their thinking is, I mean, look, I don't know that anybody really loves being told to provide every single step of a reasoning process, but there is resistance to it. And I mean, I've told you before, I'm never sure whether I'm just becoming a curmudgeon or whether it's actually a change in the students, but they seem very resistant to it.
Well, you know what, the thing that I love to do when I was teaching math, that the kids went, why do you love this? This is the worst thing. We call them word problems or story problems. And I absolutely loved them. You know, I wanted to write original story problems, and they're like, there's something wrong with you.
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure that the students read. One of the big emphases I have in my geometry class is on the idea that, you know, precision of process starts off with understanding the problem very precisely. So I give them points if they read carefully, and I take points away if they don't read carefully. And despite me doing that for the course of the entire semester, I get to the final and there's still a whole bunch of problems where they don't read the directions. They assume they know what's going on. I hit a bunch of Easter eggs in some of my instructions, things like if you don't want to answer one of the questions in this section, write your initials upside down and the name of the shape that you did in your project, and I will give you full credit for that question. And out of the 16 or so students I had in that class, I think 4 of them did that. I mean, they don't read it. They assume they know what they're doing. And that, again, is something that I think people would prefer to do. I don't know whether it is more prevalent now than it used to be in the past. Maybe this is an internet
Oh
thing.
no, it's not more prevalent. We used to do a game with freshman English where we gave them a test, but the final instruction at the top of the test was sign the test and turn it in.
Yeah, I've heard, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not many kids got the credit for that.
Yeah. Well, the only difference I thought here was that I've spent the entire class emphasizing, if it said round to tenths and they didn't round to tenths, I would note the instructions and take a point or two off. If it said, units are in centimeters and they didn't put centimeters, did that through the entire class. Get to the final, they still just assumed they knew what was going on. It's fine. I basically know how this works. It's frustrating, but teaching is frustrating.
Well, you're working with humans for one
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Well, and it's an art, right? And any art's going to have frustrating moments.
You cannot be too good. You know what happens to great teachers?
They fade away? I don't know.
No, they get killed.
Well, there's that.
Great teachers the community hates. Good teachers the community loves. Great teachers, they're a threat.
Yeah. Well, making people learn stuff, it's not something they usually want to do.
Well, and the thing is, once somebody does get something, there's no question that people who are older, more mature, more experienced, if a young kid proves to be ingenious and knowledgeable, it's not necessarily attractive.
Oh, no. And I think one of my strengths as a teacher is that I'm happy when a student is ingenious, when they come up with an interesting way to do a problem, or when they challenge me on something. I can tell that not all teachers feel that way, and I think that's too bad. I think it's vital. I think it makes you a better teacher to be challenged, among other things, but certainly you're not doing those students a service if you just smack them down. And I think a lot of teachers are more focused on the authority in their classroom than they are in the goal of educating people. And so when they have a challenge, they perceive it first and foremost as this threatens my authority in the classroom, which is the highest purpose of why I'm here, and therefore I must act against it. Whereas if you view your highest purpose in the classroom as, helping students enrich their minds and broaden themselves and deepen their experience with life, then, you want to address that kind of thing in a very positive, like, oh, thank goodness this is happening, like, what a tremendous teaching opportunity. But I don't know that everybody has the luxury of doing that either. It probably depends on the subject you're in.
That's a good point to stop on. We've done 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And did that hurt? Was it painful?
I didn't think it was going to be painful. I was just going to sit and chat with you for longer instead of go to the interview.
Thank you so much for doing this.
I'm
I
happy
really
to help.
appreciate it.
I'm happy to
I
help.
really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm just going to stop right there.
Okay.
And then, I can't remember a single other thing I asked.